The sun never set on the Spanish Empire. From the fog-shrouded coasts of Flanders to the silver mountains of Potosi, from the Philippines to the fortified ports of the Caribbean, the twin-headed eagle of Habsburg Spain cast its shadow across a world still being mapped. In the courts of Europe, diplomats whispered in Spanish. In the counting houses of Antwerp and Genoa, ledgers were balanced in Spanish reals. The galleons that crossed the Atlantic were not merely ships, they were the arteries of the first truly global empire, pumping precious metal from the New World into the beating heart of Old World power. Madrid gleamed. The Alcazar Palace stood as a monument to divine right and earthly dominance. King Philip II, the most Catholic monarch, ruled with the mechanical precision of a watchmaker, his empire a vast machine of conquest and conversion. His tercios were the finest infantry Europe had ever seen. His armada controlled the seas. His coffers should have been bottomless, fed by endless rivers of American gold and Andean silver. But beneath the gilded facade, the foundation was crumbling. The empire was fighting on too many fronts. The Dutch were in open revolt, transforming their muddy provinces into a bleeding wound that drained Spanish blood and treasure year after year. The Mediterranean simmered with Ottoman threat. The endless religious wars demanded endless financing. And finance, in the world of Philip II, meant one thing: precious metal. The arrival of the treasure fleet from the Americas was not merely a logistical event. It was the empire's life support system. Each year, bankers across Europe, the Fuggers of Augsburg, the Genoese merchant princes, even the Medici, extended credit to the Spanish crown based on a single assumption: the silver would come. The gold would arrive. America was infinite. Then came the year the fleet was delayed. Then came the year the yield was disappointing. And then came the secret memorandum, passed from the Viceroy of Peru to the Council of the Indies, marked with the royal seal and the notation, "For His Majesty's eyes only." The mines were depleting. The easily accessible veins had been worked to exhaustion. The indigenous labor force was collapsing under the weight of disease and brutality. Production was falling, and costs were rising. The engine of empire was sputtering. In a gilded chamber in the Alcazar, Philip II read the report 3 times. Then he locked it in his personal strongbox. The truth was a weapon his enemies could not be allowed to wield. The empire would find new sources. It had to. And in the steaming jungles of New Granada, a man named Mateo da Silva was about to provide the king exactly what he needed to hear. Mateo da Silva was not supposed to matter. Born to minor gentry fallen on hard times, he had clawed his way into the ranks of the conquistadors through sheer desperation and a willingness to endure what softer men would not. But in the rigid hierarchy of the vice-regal court, bloodline was everything. The titled commanders, the men who traced their ancestry to the Reconquista, looked through him as if he were heir. They gave him the expeditions no one else wanted, the fool's errands into territories already stripped bare, the marches into disease-ridden swamps chasing rumors of tribes too poor to be worth the gunpowder. His latest commission was a death sentence disguised as an opportunity: lead a party into the uncharted reaches beyond the Amazon headwaters, into territories where previous expeditions had simply disappeared. No one expected him to return. That was the point. 3 months into the jungle, da Silva's expedition was dying. Of the 47 men who had set out, 19 remained. Fever had claimed more lives than arrows. The promised guide had fled. They were lost in a green hell where the canopy blocked out the sky and every stream looked identical to the last. The men were beginning to whisper about mutiny. About turning back. About throwing their captain into the river and making their own way to the coast. Da Silva knew what awaited him if he returned empty-handed. Court-martial. Disgrace. Public execution as a warning to other failures. His family's last shreds of honor, extinguished. His body, left to rot on a scaffold as carrion for tropical birds. In desperation, he ordered a raid on a small riverside settlement. The villagers had gold, not much, crude ornaments and a few nuggets from stream panning, but gold nonetheless. His men took it all. They took everything. And as they prepared to withdraw, Da Silva saw something in the village elder's terrified eyes. An idea crystallized, sharp and terrible and perfect. He would not return a failure. He would return a hero. The report he dispatched to the viceroy was a masterpiece of calculated deception. He wrote of finding tributaries choked with gold dust. Of mountains that glittered in the dawn light. Of native accounts, carefully vague, tantalizing, of a great city deeper in the interior where the temples were roofed with hammered gold. He did not call it El Dorado. He was too clever for that. He called it the source. The place from which all the rumors originated. The prize Spain had been seeking since Pizarro first set foot in Peru. As proof, he sent the plundered ornaments. A trickle of gold to suggest a flood waiting behind it. The viceroy, desperate for good news to send to Madrid, believed. Or perhaps he simply needed to believe. The report was forwarded to Spain with an enthusiastic endorsement. Additional resources were requested. Da Silva was promoted in absentia and ordered to press deeper into the interior, to make contact with this city, to secure Spain's claim. And in the Alcazar, King Philip II read the report and saw salvation. He saw an answer to the secret memorandum locked in his strongbox. He saw a way to keep the empire's creditors calm for another year, another decade, another generation. He did more than believe. He acted. The royal bonds of El Dorado were a stroke of financial genius, or perhaps madness. History would struggle to decide which. Philip II's advisors proposed them as a solution to the empire's immediate liquidity crisis. Rather than admit the silver mines were faltering, rather than default on existing debts, Spain would issue a new class of sovereign bonds backed not by current revenue, but by future gold shipments from Da Silva's discovery. The terms were irresistible. 12% annual interest, payable in precious metal. Full principal repayment guaranteed within 5 years, when Da Silva's expedition would have established mining operations and begun large-scale extraction. The bonds were marketed across Europe with all the propaganda machinery the Spanish crown could muster. Testimonial letters from the viceroy. Samples of the gold Da Silva had sent. Maps showing the location of the source deep in the terra incognita of South America. The Fuggers bought. The Genoese syndicates bought. Even the cautious merchant banks of Amsterdam, neutral in the Dutch revolt, quietly purchased blocks of bonds through intermediaries. Everyone wanted exposure to the greatest mineral discovery since Potosi. The initial issuance sold out within weeks. A second issuance followed. Then a third. The influx of cash was intoxicating. Spain's armies were resupplied. Debts were paid. The war in the Netherlands intensified, funded now by money that existed only because European financiers believed in a jungle city that existed only in Mateo da Silva's imagination. And in that jungle, Da Silva was trapped in his own lie. His men knew the truth. They had seen the pathetic village they had plundered. They knew there was no city, no mountains of gold, no magical source. His lieutenant, a scarred veteran named Diego Ruiz, confronted him one sweat-soaked evening as the expedition camped on a sandbar, surrounded by the sounds of the jungle darkness. "We should return," Ruiz said quietly. "Confess. Throw ourselves on the crown's mercy." "There is no mercy," Da Silva replied. "Only the scaffold. Better a quick death than this slow one. The men are dying. Fever. Starvation. Yesterday, Hernan tried to eat bark and choked to death on it. If we go back, they will torture every man to confirm the story. Your family will be stripped of property. Your name will be synonymous with treason. Is that what you want? I want to stop living this nightmare." "Then you'll have to kill me," Da Silva said, his hand moving to his sword. Because I'm not going back. We stay here. We send periodic reports. We maintain the illusion. And we pray that someone else discovers real gold before the bonds come due. They stared at each other in the firelight. Ruiz's hand trembled near his own weapon. Behind them, the other men watched, waiting to see which way the crisis would break. Ruiz looked away first. The moment passed. But Da Silva knew he had only bought time. The expedition was fracturing. Some men had already deserted, vanishing into the forest to take their chances with the indigenous peoples rather than continue the charade. Others whispered of mutiny. Of forcing their way back to civilization and telling the truth, consequences be damned. And in Europe, a Spanish courtier named Don Fernando de Alcántara, rival to Da Silva's original patron, was asking inconvenient questions. Why had no follow-up expedition been sent? Why were the reports from Da Silva so vague? Why had no diplomatic mission established contact with the indigenous city? De Alcántara convinced the viceroy to send a verification party, ostensibly to support Da Silva, actually to investigate whether the golden future Spain had mortgaged itself to purchase was real. The lie was approaching its expiration date. And there was no way out that did not end in catastrophe. The spy Don Fernando dispatched was named Alonso Vasquez, a former scout who knew the jungle and had no loyalty to Da Silva's patron. He tracked the expedition's supposed route, interviewing native guides, examining claimed landmarks. What he found was absence. Villages that had been pacified showed no signs of Spanish contact. The geographic features Da Silva had described did not exist. The source was a fiction. Vasquez's report reached Seville on the same day the first royal bonds of El Dorado matured and came due for interest payment. The timing was catastrophic. The Fugger banking house, holding the largest position in the bonds, demanded immediate answers. When the Spanish treasury requested a grace period, citing logistical difficulties with precious metal transport from the frontier, the Fuggers went public with Vasquez's findings. Within days, every banking house in Europe knew the truth. El Dorado was a fraud. The bonds were worthless. And Spain's credit, built on centuries of American treasure, collapsed in a matter of weeks. The Spanish crown declared default. It was not the first. Philip II would ultimately default 4 times in his reign, but this was the most humiliating. The empire that claimed divine right to rule the world had been exposed as a debtor nation living on borrowed time and borrowed money. The bonds became a cautionary tale, traded for pennies as collectors' curiosities, physical evidence of the perils of believing in miracles. In Madrid, heads rolled. Da Silva's original patron was arrested and died in prison. The viceroy who had endorsed the reports was recalled in disgrace. And in the jungles of South America, the verification party that went searching for Da Silva found only abandoned campsites and conflicting native accounts. Some said the Spanish captain had been killed by his own men. Others claimed he had gone native, disappearing into the forest. One tribe spoke of a bearded ghost who still wandered the rivers, forever searching for gold that did not exist. Mateo da Silva had become part of the very myth he created, neither hero nor villain, but a cautionary tale about the price of desperation and the dangers of believing your own lies. The empire survived, but it was diminished. The Dutch revolt gained ground as Spanish military funding evaporated. The Genoese bankers shifted their loyalties to other courts. The center of financial gravity began its slow migration northward, toward Amsterdam, toward London, toward powers that built their wealth on trade and manufacturing rather than plundered treasure. The gilded facade had finally crumbled. What remained was an empire hollow at its core, sustained by fading glory and the memory of what it had once been. Spain would endure for centuries more, but never again as the colossus that made Europe tremble. The sun still set on the Spanish Empire after all. It just took one desperate man's lie to reveal the truth: power built on gold alone is power built on sand. And when the tide of history turns, even the mightiest empires are washed away, leaving behind only legends of what they claimed to be. The royal bonds of El Dorado gathered dust in archives across Europe, physical reminders of a simple lesson the powerful never seem to learn. In the end, you cannot mortgage the future forever. Eventually, someone comes to collect. And when they do, the only currency that matters is the truth you spent so long trying to hide.